broadcasting on 910 AM Superstation WFDF and our social media platforms. Welcome to the African History Network show. It is Sunday, July 23rd, 2023, and we are live. We have a lot to discuss today. It's been a very busy weekend. Some of you all saw me on Roland Martin Unfiltered on Friday, and one of the topics that we discussed on Roland's show is the new Black History Month social studies standards coming out of the great state of Florida. And there was a 216-page document released on Wednesday, July 19th, Wednesday, July 19th. And the Florida State Board of Education's new standards include controversial language about how, quote, slaves developed skills, which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit. Now, I did after I did Roland's show on Friday, I did a short broadcast, did about 55 minutes, detailing this, explaining this some more. And one of the, there's a few disturbing things about this. We're going to break this down on today's show and go deeper than I even did in my analysis after I did Roland's show. There's a number of disturbing things about this. Number one, first of all, there were at least 262 skills, trades, and crafts that African people had in this country from 1619 to 1865. Okay. Some of those skills we brought with us from Africa. But even though I haven't had a chance to read this entire 216-page document, it appears that this is an attempt to try to sanitize slavery as well and sanitize the horrors of slavery. But the other thing is they gave 16 examples. A spokesperson from the Florida Department of Education gave 16 examples of African Americans who they said gained skills during slavery and benefited from it. Okay. Well, at least half of those people that they named, at least half of them were never slaves. Okay. They named people like Paul Cuffey and Henry Blair, Lewis Latimer, John Henry, Betty Washington, Crispus Attucks. Okay. They named a number of people, but almost half of the people they named were never slaves. So we're going to break this down on the show today. We know that Vice President Kamala Harris went to Florida. She made an emergency trip to Florida, her own decision, to denounce the new social studies standards. We discussed this on Roland Martin Unfiltered. So we'll let you hear some of her comments regarding that. Then there was a story that, on Roland's show, I also talked about the lost cause. Okay. And the lost cause is a campaign. It's about a 130-year campaign coming out of the South to rewrite the history of the Civil War and write a revisionist history of the Civil War and make the Confederates, make the traitors to the Union, make them the heroes. All right. And this effort here coming out of Florida, even though there's probably some factual things in the curriculum, this effort out of Florida reminds me of the lost cause. So we're going to talk some about the lost cause on today's show as well. Now, there was an article that I saw from NBC News a few days ago, and we posted about this on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network. And this article deals with how ex-Confederates spread racist attitudes far and wide after the Civil War. Okay, after the Civil War ended in 1865. This deals with how ex-Confederates who migrated from the South out west, how they spread racist attitudes Okay, and this is known as the Confederate Diaspora, the Confederate Diaspora. Okay, well, this ties directly into what's taking place in Florida right now, former Confederate state as well. Florida has a deep history of racism. And one of the things that's coming out of the new Florida standards on social studies is that um, also they're going to teach about how Black people were not just victims of violence during race massacres, but also perpetrators of violence during race massacres. It appears they're trying to do this whataboutism as well. Okay. We'll talk about that also, because one of the massacres that was mentioned was the November 2nd, 1920 Ocoee massacre, which took place in Florida. And the Ocoee massacre is probably the worst example of election day violence. And you had about 50 African Americans, around 50 African Americans who were killed during the Ocoee massacre. And this happened because African Americans were trying to vote. And there was intimidation from the Ku Klux Klan, and they rode through the African American community the day before the election and said that they threatened us and said that if any of us attempted to vote on election day, that we would be met with violence, there would be consequences. Okay, so this is the Ocoee massacre, which took place in Florida. And we fought back. When you go study these massacres, whether it's the Ocoee massacre, whether it's the Red Summer 1990, at 25 major race riots all across the country, whether it's Black Wall Street 1921, the Greenwood District, whether it's the Rosewood, Florida massacre 1923, we fought back also. We fought back and we shot back. Okay, so this is what's taking place in Florida right now, at a time as we get deeper into the 2024 presidential elections. All right, so we'll discuss that on today's show. And then also, there was another story that I saw. We have an update in the case of Carley Russell out of Alabama, the African-American woman, 25 years old, who mysteriously disappeared. The police held a press conference this past week and said they have no evidence of her abduction. They have no evidence to corroborate statements that she made about being abducted and being abducted by a man and a woman and all of this. Okay, so we're going to share an update on what's going on with that case as well. And then there was a story that we posted on our Facebook fan page a few days ago dealing with African Americans and the 2024 presidential election and House of Representatives in the U.S. Senate. And this deals with Congressional Black Caucus allies are launching a political action committee, a PAC. They're launching a PAC called Rolling C Action Fund, Rolling C Action Fund. And this political action committee is going to invest at least $10 million in educating the African-American voter and turning out the African-American voter for the 2024 election, and with the goal of Democrats taking back control of the U.S. House of Representatives and making Hakeem Jeffries the first African-American Speaker of the House of Representatives. So we're going to talk about this on today's show. The political, the executive director of the Rolling C Action Fund PAC, her name is Nakara Campbell Wallace. Nakara Campbell Wallace. She's a former political director for the Congressional Black Caucus. She was on Morning Joe this past week, MSNBC. I'm going to let you hear that conversation as well. This is extremely, extremely important. Democrats have to take back control of the House of Representatives, take back control from the crazies, from these MAGA Republicans. I'm neither Democrat nor Republican, but I'm definitely not stupid. And we report on what's going on here. I'm not just a historian, I'm also a political commentator. That's why you see me on Roland Martin Unfiltered almost every Friday for about 3 years. I started October 2020, been on almost every week since then. Okay, so we'll discuss that, and we'll give you an update on the 12-week online course that I teach on Saturdays, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. We had a great class session yesterday, and you can register for this 12-week online course at our website, TheAHNShow.com, TheAHNShow.com. Okay, now on the African History Network show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's correct wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when you control the radius of a man or woman's thoughts, you control the compass of his or her actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. Okay, I want to jump into this first topic here, because we're going to cover this in the first hour. All right, so we're up against a break. We'll continue to another side of the break. Calling numbers 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the calling number if you have a question or comment. I'm Michael Imhotep. This is the African History Network show, 9:10 a.m. Superstation WFDF. We'll be back in a few minutes. Bathroom break in 4 minutes. Stand by. Stand by. Stand by. Bathroom break in 4 minutes. All right, everybody, share this broadcast on social media platforms. Give us a thumbs up, give us a heart, give us a like on this broadcast. Invite your friends to tune in also. Stand by. Bathroom break in 3 minutes. Okay, bathroom break in 3 minutes. Stand by, everybody. Okay, we got Boulder Rock, Kenya J. Russell, Joya Sales. Everybody share this broadcast on social media platforms. Bathroom break in 3 minutes. One commercial break. Stand by. Calling numbers 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the calling number if you have a question or comment. Stand by. Bathroom break in 2 minutes. Back from break in 2 minutes. Back from break in 1 minute.
Is what you want. 9:10 a.m. is what you need. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. On the After History Network show, we focus on educating the mind and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world. A lot of people don't know what the hell they're talking about. Then you have the expertise. But some people need to learn how to stay in their own lane. If you don't know, just say you don't know. So we have a lot to talk about, so we're going to jump right into this. Catch it all right here on 9:10 a.m. Superstation.
Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation, Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. Calling numbers 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the calling number if you have a question or comment. All right. So we're going to jump into this first topic here. Okay, so a lot of people have been discussing this. We discussed this on Roland Martin Unfiltered. We're going to clip number 1 here in just a minute, Doug. This comes out of the state of Florida. New Florida standards teach students that some Black people benefited from slavery because it taught useful skills. This article is from July 20th, 2023, NBCnews.com. Okay, so here's what happened. Florida public schools will now teach students that some Black people benefited from slavery because it taught them useful skills. This is part of new African American history standards approved on Wednesday, July 19th, 2023, that were blasted by a state teachers union as a quote unquote step backward. Now, the Florida State Board of Education's new standards includes controversial language about how slaves developed skills which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit. Slaves developed skills which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit, according to a 216-page document about the state's 2023 standards in social studies. This was posted by the Florida Department of Education. Now, I've been going through reading some of these new standards, okay? And maybe next week we'll talk some about this, some more on next week's show. But they have a link here to the 216-page document, and we can probably pull it up here. Let's see here. Okay, I'll pull it up during the break because I've been going through looking at it. All right, now other language that has drawn the ire of some educators and education advocates includes teaching about how Black people were also perpetrators of violence during race massacres, how some African Americans were perpetrators of violence during race massacres. Okay, now it appears, like I said, I haven't been able to read the 216-page document, the full document, but it appears that they're going to try to label acts of African Americans defending themselves against these domestic terrorist attacks. They're going to try to call that acts of violence and try to say, what aboutism? Well, it happened on both sides. We're defending ourselves against the domestic terrorists, and in many cases, the police weren't doing anything to help defend us. Okay, so Now, that language says, quote, instructions include acts of violence perpetrated against and by African Americans, but is not limited to the 1906 Atlanta race riot, the 1919 Washington, D.C. race riot, which took place during the Red Summer of 1919. And during the Red Summer, you had at least 25 major race riots across this country. Okay, and this was the year after World War I ended. The Ocoee Massacre, which started November 2nd, 1920, which was an election day massacre, probably the worst example of election day violence. The 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre in the Greenwood district of Tulsa and Black Wall Street, and the 1923 Rosewood Massacre, January 1923 in Florida. The Rosewood Massacre in Florida. The movie Rosewood, directed by John Singleton, starring Ving Rhames and John Voight, is about the Rosewood Massacre. Now, the Florida Education Association, which is a statewide teachers union representing about 150,000 teachers, called the new standards, quote unquote, a disservice to Florida's students and are a big step backward for a state that has required teaching African American history since 1994. Okay, they said that these new standards are a disservice to Florida students and are a big step backward for a state that has required teaching African American history since 1994. Andrew Spar, who is the president of the Florida Education Association, said, how can our students ever be equipped for the future if they don't have a full, honest picture of where we've come from? Florida students deserve a world-class education that equips them to be successful adults who can help heal our nations, divisions rather than deepen them. Now, Andrew Spar went on to say, quote, Governor Ron DeSantis is pursuing a political agenda guaranteed to set good people against one another. And in the process, he's cheating our kids. They deserve the full truth of American history, the good and the bad. Now, Governor Ron DeSantis, responding after Vice President Kamala Harris spoke in Florida on Friday, Governor Ron DeSantis said he didn't have anything to do with these new standards. Okay. Now, the teachers union said it is troubling that at the high school level, these new standards apparently conflate the 1920 Ocoee Massacre in Florida, when at least 30 African Americans were killed for attempting to vote, but according to blackpast.org, it was more like 50 African Americans were killed, and 2 white people were killed also. When you had African Americans killed for attempting to vote, it appears that they're trying to conflate this with, quote, acts of violence perpetuated by African Americans. And in middle school, the new standards require students to be taught that slavery was beneficial to African Americans, or at least some African Americans, because it helped them develop skills, the union said. All right, now, updates to the African American history curriculum were required by a controversial 2022 law that Governor Ron DeSantis dubbed the Stop Wrongs to Our Kids and Employees Act, or what's also known as the Stop Woke Act. Okay, and this is reported by NBC South Florida. So it's these now people are blaming these new standards that they're blaming this Stop Woke Act law that Governor Ron DeSantis signed into law in 2022. They're blaming that for these revisions that are coming. Now, a spokesperson from the Florida Department of Education on Thursday which was July 20th, provided a response to NBC News questions through a statement from Dr. William Allen and Dr. Francis Presley Rice, who are members of Florida's African American History Standards Work Group. Okay, so I've seen comments on social media. We posted about this on social media, different articles. I saw some white people saying, well, it was 2 black PhDs who put this together or something like that. I think it's more than 2 black PhDs who put this together. But these are 2 that are responding. Now, the problem is the evidence that they provided to justify the new curriculum and justify the new standards are problematic. Okay, and in my 55-minute analysis on this after I did Roland Martin show, we talked about this. We'll deal with this also on today's show. Now, the new standards were defended in the statement. Okay, now this was so a spokesperson from the Florida Department of Education on Thursday, July 20th, provided a response to NBC's questions through a statement from Dr. William Allen and Dr. Francis Presley Rice. Okay, these are 2 African Americans, apparently. Okay, now the new standards were defended in the statement as, quote, comprehensive and rigorous instruction on African American history. We proudly stand behind these African American history standards, end quote, the statement said. Okay, they went on to say the intent of this particular benchmark clarification is to show that some slaves developed highly specialized trades from which they benefited. This is factual and well documented. Now, there were at least 262 skills, trades, and crafts that African people had in this country from 1619 to 1865. Some of those skills we brought with us from Africa. One of the problem is the 16 examples that these 2 black people released, these 2 PhDs released, at least half of these people were never slaves. We're going to deal with this on the other side of the break. Proper documentation ends all conversation. Give us a call. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. Listen to the African History Network show. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Back from break in 4 minutes. Stand by. Back from break in 4 minutes. Okay. How's everybody doing? Give us a thumbs up. Give us a heart. Give us a like on this broadcast. Back from break in 4 minutes. Also, if you like this type of information, you can support the African History Network, $ the AHN show through Cash App, $ the AHN show through Cash App, also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show. This helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting, pay some of the bills, do our Sunday night show. Stand by. Oh, hell, where is that? Right here. Okay, stand by. Back from break in 2 minutes. Stand by. Bathroom break in 2 minutes.
Is what you want. 9:10 a.m. is what you need. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. On the African History Network show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world. A lot of people don't know what the hell they're talking about. Then you have the areas of expertise. But some people need to learn how to stay in their own lane. If you don't know, just say you don't know. So we have a lot to talk about, so we're going to jump right into this. Catch it all right here on 9:10 a.m. Superstation. The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producers and or the persons appearing on the program, and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of 910 AM Superstation or Adele Media.
Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation. All right. I want to go back to this clip. I want to go back to this article. We'll go to clip number 1 here in just a second, Doug. Okay, so as I was saying before the break, the 16 examples of African Americans who allegedly use skills that they learned during slavery to benefit themselves. So different news outlets have done the research, and I was looking at some of these examples also. Almost half of these examples that they give were never slaves. So the statement continued, quote, some examples of African Americans who were slaves, who learned skills during slavery that benefited them, were blacksmiths like Ned Cobb, Henry Blair, Lewis Latimer, who worked with Thomas Edison, and John Henry, shoemakers like James Fortin, Paul Cuffey, and Betty Washington Lewis, fishing and shipping industry workers like Jupiter Heyman, John Chavis, William Whipper, and Crispus Attucks, tailors like Elizabeth Keckley, James Thomas, and Marietta Carter, and teachers like Betsy Stockton and Booker T. Washington. Okay, end quote. Now this is the statement coming from 2 African American PhDs, Dr. William Allen and Dr. Francis Presley Rice, who are members of Florida's African American History Standards Work Group. This is their rebuttal, okay, to justify this section of the new standards. They went on to say it's disappointing that some detractors would devalue the research from the work group and reduce it to quote, a few isolated expressions without context, end quote, the statement said. Now, it is true, like I said, there were at least 262 skills, trades, and crafts that African people had in this country from 1619 to 1865. Okay, a lot of those skills we brought with us from Africa. Okay, we didn't have to be kidnapped, taken away from our family, taken away from our land, stripped of our nationality, largely stripped of our history, culture, language, spiritual systems, etc., to be taught how to be a blacksmith. We came from very sophisticated civilizations, whether you're talking about the Songhai Empire, whether you're talking about the Ashanti Empire, whether you're talking about in the Congo and Angola area. We came from, we already had skills. Okay, when you look at this, the artwork that we were doing in African civilizations, in African cultures, and things of this nature, that artwork, those sculptures are going to be stolen by Europeans during the transatlantic slave trade and afterwards. Okay, so we already had skills. Now, there's in my lectures and in the online classes that I teach, and you can register for my classes at our website. TheAHNShow.com, TheAHNShow.com. We deal with this in my class, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what it didn't teach you in school. The book, The Other Slaves, by James Newton and Ronald Lewis, which came out in 1978. The Other Slaves, Mechanics, Artisans, and Craftsmen. It details at least 262 skills, trades, and crafts that we had in this country. We were anchor makers, artists, bakers, barrel makers, bartenders, basket makers, beer makers, blacksmiths, bricklayers, brick makers, cabinet makers, cigar makers, cooks, coppersmiths, decorative furnishers, decorative furnishers, fishermen, engineers, gardeners, hemp baggers, herb doctors, horse trainers, hunters, locksmiths. This is just a few of them. They list them in alphabetical order. Okay. Now, I first saw this at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History here in Detroit. Now, this is an actual slide from the class. And what happened was there's at the main exhibit that they have called "And Still We Rise." There's a when you go through that main exhibit and then you come out on the other side, there's it takes you throughout history. You see Frederick Douglass and you'll see Harriet Tubman and different things like this, right? So there's a display on the wall that lists these skills, trades, and crafts. And I saw this back in 2012 on one of my many visits to the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. And there's a sign on the display, it's a big display on the wall, okay? And there's a sign on the display that says you can't take pictures. So I went home, I got a pen and a pad. I went back and I spent an hour writing them down and I numbered them. That's how I know it's at least 262 because I wrote them down and I numbered them. Okay. And I did this on July 13th, 2012, because I write the date on things like this that I do also. So here's a list of the skills, trades, and crafts. I just showed you an excerpt of it, but there's at least, I numbered them, and there's at least the 262nd one is yoke makers, Y-O-K-E, yoke makers. Okay, now a lot of these were skills that we brought with us from Africa, some we learned here, but we didn't have to be kidnapped to be put into an apprenticeship program. Okay, we didn't have to be kidnapped and put through torturous conditions, stripped of our humanity, stripped of our nationality, largely history, language, spiritual systems, etc., folklores, mores, to be put into an apprenticeship program to hopefully benefit us at some point in the future. Okay, now, even though there are examples of African Americans who were able to use their trades either to earn money to buy their freedom or after slavery ends, there are examples of this, but this was definitely not the norm. Okay, so let's continue. Then we're going to go to clip number 1 here in just a minute because we're coming up on another break. Now, this is the in the article I showed you from NBC News, they have a link to the 216 page new standards. Florida standards is called Florida's State Academic Standards Social Studies 2023. You can just Google this, Florida's State Academic Standards Social Studies 2023. I've been going through reading this. Okay. And it goes through and it's like an outline. It talks about different topics that are going to be covered. Now, I haven't seen the curriculum, like the actual text of what will be taught, but I've seen outlines, topics that will be taught, things like this. Now, they do have some, just from looking at the outlines and the topics that are going to be taught, they do have some factual information that's going to be taught, but there's some other stuff from what we're hearing that's problematic. Okay. All right. Now, if we go back to this article here from NBC News, now in a representative for Governor Ron DeSantis could not be immediately reached for comment on Thursday. DeSantis has spoken out since then. We'll let you hear what he had to say. Now, in January, the Governor Ron DeSantis administration blocked a new advanced placement course on African American studies from being taught in high schools, saying it violates state law and was historically inaccurate. The state pointing to 6 areas of concern and works by Kemet and who was one of the architects of critical race theory, Bell Hooks, Angela Davis, and other Black authors. Governor Ron DeSantis and Education Commissioner Manny Diaz Jr. discussed the issue at a news conference. They said that the course, the Advanced Placement African American Studies course, was a Trojan horse for indoctrinating students with left-wing ideology under the guise of teaching about the experience in African American history, under the guise of teaching about the Black experience and African American history. Okay, now we're coming up here on a break. There is also another good article that I saw from CBSNews.com, because I've read a number of different articles on this. CBSNews.com, Florida's new Black history curriculum says slaves develop skills that could be used for personal benefit. Now, this is from July 21st. This is from July 21st, 2023. And in this article here, there's something I want to focus on, because they had some additional information in this one here. The line about, let's scroll down. Okay. Florida's 2023 social studies curriculum will include lessons on how slaves develop skills that could be used for personal benefit, according to a copy of the state's academic standards reviewed by CBS News. The lessons in question fall under the social studies curriculum's African American studies section, and will be taught to students in 6th through 8th grade. Will be taught to students in 6th through 8th grade, according to the state standards. The lessons for that grade will include teachings on understanding, quote, causes, courses, and consequences of the slave trade in the colonies, and instruction on the differences and similarities between serfdom and slavery, the curriculum says. We'll continue this on the other side of the break. You listen to the African History Network show. I'm Michael Imhotep, 9:10 a.m. Superstation WFDF. We'll be back in a few minutes. Stand by. All right, how's everybody doing? Give us a thumbs up, give us a heart, give us a like on this broadcast. You can support the African History Network, $ the AHN show through Cash App, $ the AHN show through Cash App, also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show. Stand by. Back from break in 4 minutes. Back from break in 4 minutes. Stand by. How's everybody doing on YouTube? Stand by. Back from break in 3 minutes. Back from break in 2 minutes.
Programming is what you want. 9:10 a.m. is what you need. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. On the After History Network show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world. I know what the hell they're talking about. Then they have the areas of expertise, but some people need to learn how to stay in their own lane. If you don't know, just say you don't know. So we have a lot to talk about, so we're going to jump right into this. Catch it all right here on 9:10 a.m. Superstation.
Welcome back to the African History Network show. Okay, I want to go to, let's see, we're going to go to clip number one here, Doug. So clip number one, this is from, let's see, what is this from here? Okay, this is from Alex Wagner tonight, MSNBC. This is from July 20th, 2023. She spoke with Jelani Cobb, Columbia Journalism School professor in the Columbia Journalism School. They talked about these new social studies standards coming out of Florida, poisoning the whale. Florida middle schoolers to be dragged into DeSantis war on history. Let's go to clip number one, please, Doug.
It may not be familiar to you, but this is John Brown. John Brown was enslaved in the mid-1800s and subjected to excruciating experiments by a Georgia doctor named Thomas Hamilton. Hamilton believed there were physiological differences between black and white people, and he used Brown's body to prove it. After he escaped slavery, Brown described what happened to him in an autobiography. Dr. Hamilton set to work to ascertain how deep my black skin went. This he did by applying blisters to my hands, legs, and feet, which bear the scars to this day. That happened because Dr. Hamilton, a slave owner, was trying to scientifically bolster the prevailing ideology that black people were mentally and physically inferior to white people and therefore benefited from enslavement. That thinking was so pervasive at the time, it spawned propaganda like this print from slavery apologists who pushed a narrative that enslaved blacks in the U.S. were better off than white factory workers in Britain. And it provided material for slaveholders like South Carolina Senator John Calhoun, who in an 1837 speech argued that slavery was a boon to black people. Never before has the black race of Central Africa, from the dawn of history to the present day, attained a condition so civilized and so improved, not only physically, but morally and intellectually. This kind of thinking gave rise to junk science like drapetomania, which translates to runaway madness. It was a clinical term of the 1850s based on the belief that slavery so vastly improved the lives of the enslaved, they would have to be mentally ill to run away. The term drapetomania was not removed from medical textbooks until after 1914. Human experiments and racist propaganda and fake science were used to prove something that we all know now is patently false. Black people did not benefit from slavery, quite obviously. But this year, in Florida, the echoes of those falsehoods can be heard once again. Yesterday, the Florida Board of Education approved new standards for Black history instruction that require lessons for middle schoolers to include, quote, how slaves developed skills, which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit. The old racist trope from the 1850s that slavery benefited the enslaved seems to have been resurrected in Florida, and middle schoolers in that state may be required to learn it. As part of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' efforts to whitewash Black history, high schoolers in the state's public school system will now be taught that race massacres, like the racial terror in Ocoee in 1920, the largest incident of voting day violence in American history, that those massacres included acts of violence perpetrated against and by African Americans. In reality, it was a white mob that killed 60 people in Ocoee after a Black man tried to vote. Those guidelines are part of a new set of standards that Florida's Board of Education approved yesterday, downplaying America's history of anti-Black violence. And as part of their campaign to Make America Florida, state officials want to export those standards nationally. Joining me now is Jelani Cobb, Dean of the Journalism School at Columbia University, and of course a staff writer for The New Yorker. Dean, I feel like I'm always bringing you on for the news around education gets more and more depressing, especially in the state of Florida. This seems, for a long time, the effort has been minimize white aggression, minimize white crime, minimize white murder and targeting of people of color throughout American history. Now, sort of the other side of that coin is, and upsell the notion that either Black people enjoyed slavery or that they were somehow complicit in this racially motivated violence.
Sure. And so this is outrageous, but it's not shocking. When you know the history of this is just a repetition. So even as these events were being perpetrated, there were attempts to, one, eliminate the record. When you go to Tulsa and also when you go to Ocoee, many of the official documents that you would use to actually record that history have been destroyed. And so there's the attempt to whitewash it in the immediate aftermath, and then the reversal of the narrative to make it seem that the people who were victimizers were actually victims, and people who were victims were actually victimizers. The most pernicious part of this, however, is not the dishonesty, not the outright lying on people and who lost their lives, but it's the purpose of it.
Yeah.
They do this in order to uphold an unjust and unfair state of affairs in the nation and in the state. So they're telling the story. The question is, they're telling the story for what ultimate purpose? And I think that's where it gets to be really pernicious.
Well, it's pernicious, but it's, at least from my vantage point, transparently pernicious. It is so egregious that the Vice President of the United States is going to Florida tomorrow to talk about what's happening in the Florida public school system. I wonder if you think they get away with this.
They potentially can. Given what we've seen, the Anti-Woke Act and the Don't Say Gay Act, and the kind of rearguard march that's happened in education in Florida, the way that they're antagonizing people at the university level, the way that they are, creating a chilling effect, across education on all of these tiers, I'm not sure that they won't be able to get away with this. I will say one thing that I think is also particularly disturbing is the fact that Ron DeSantis was a history major.
Yeah.
That he graduated from Yale with a degree in history. I know the faculty at Yale. I know that department. I've lectured at Yale. Nobody, I can guarantee you, nobody taught Ron DeSantis the foolishness that we're seeing being passed off as history in Florida right now.
Well, I think I believe you.
We're going to pause it right there. Pause it right there, Doug. Pause it right there. All right, we'll continue this on the other side of the break. You listen to the African History Network show. Now, if you like this type of information, you want to support the African History Network also, you can do so. $, the AHN show through Cash App and through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show. Or go to our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. When you scroll down the page, we have the information there right there on the homepage. You can also register for my online history classes. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number. If you have a question or comment, we'll go to your questions and comments when we come back from the break. We'll be back in a few minutes. Stand by. Back from break in 4 minutes. Stand by. Back from break in 3 minutes. All right. And you can support us through Cash App or PayPal. That's better than doing it through YouTube, because YouTube only pays out once a month. And they take like a third of the donations when they go through YouTube. Stand by. Back from break in 2 minutes. Back from break in 1 minute. Stand by.
Superstation, a division of Adele Media. If great programming is what you want, 9:10 a.m. is what you need. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. On the African History Network Show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world. A lot of people don't know what the hell they're talking about. Then you have the areas of expertise. But some people need to learn how to stay in their own lane. If you don't know, just say you don't know. So we have a lot to talk about, so we're going to jump right into this. Catch it all right here on 9:10 a.m. Superstation. The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producers and or the persons appearing on the program, and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of 910 AM Superstation or Adele Media.
Welcome back to the African History Network show. Okay, we're going back to this clip here from MSNBC. This is from Alex Wagner tonight. She was speaking with Professor of Journalism at Columbia University, Jelani Cobb, about the new Florida social studies standards when it comes to teaching African American history. Let's go back to the clip, please, Doug.
That we're seeing being passed off as history in Florida right now.
Well, I think I believe you when you say that. I think what's equally disturbing about all of this is that other states are looking to Florida as a guiding light in terms of how to revise American history, how to shift the country into reverse, as you say. And what could emerge is literally just the fragmentation of American education, right? Where you have blue states that are not under the same sort of duress as red states, where history is taught in a fulsome way, and then red states where we have revised our history, where there's a different understanding that children are brought up with as it comes to America's bloody and violent history on race. And what are the implications for a country already so fractured to poison the well in the education system? We're talking about children in elementary and middle and high school to be brought up with this.
Sure. So the issue is the protection of hard-won rights.
Yeah.
The fact that people were excluded from the social compact, excluded from the civic compact, the fact that people had to lose their lives in order to attain rights that were granted in other communities at birth. And so that is the fundamental narrative, and that's a crucial narrative in terms of understanding how this nation came to be what it is. Now, if you eliminate that narrative, what you do is make it possible to marginalize those people again, to strip away their rights again, and not only to be able to do that, but for the public to not even understand the travesty as it is happening.
Right. So when you say, I mean, basically, they tried to censor the phrase structural racism, and now they're actually trying to tear down the sort of structure itself, right? It's not just the language, it's actually the history itself, trying to revise it in a way where structural racism, not only can you not say it, it never actually existed. I mean, I think the fundamental issue is that we understand that to be cancerous for the United States of America. Other states, so enamored of this idea that CRT has poisoned the well, are going to replicate. I mean, do you think it's a foregone conclusion that this gets replicated in red states where governors have looked kindly upon what Governor DeSantis is doing?
I mean, people will try. I mean, that's absolutely the same thing that we saw with CRT. And so, what you do is strip away the utility of history in the first place. And as I say time and time again, teams watch their game tape to see what they got wrong, not what they got right.
You're so right.
That's the whole purpose of studying history in the first place.
If you negate the study of history, then you devastate the world of politics and policy making. I'll say that, because so much of what we're trying to do is correct the wrongs of the past through policy, through programs. We see why it all dovetails into a political agenda. Dean Jelani Cobb, it is always so enlightening.
All right. I'm not sure why I faded out like that at the towards the end, but okay. So that was from Alex Wagner tonight, MSNBC. That's from July 20th, 2023. All right, now I was sharing with you the article from CBSNews.com, and once again, the name of that article is, you can read it in its entirety. Florida's new Black history curriculum says slaves develop skills that could be used for personal benefit. Okay, so check that one out also. All right, now we're going to go to clip number 3 here in just a minute, Doug. Okay, so Vice President Kamala Harris made an emergency trip to Florida on Friday. We know Thursday she spoke at the 53rd Conference for Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated in Indianapolis, Indiana. My timeline was full of Deltas who I know who were at the conference posting about it. And then she spoke about this on Thursday when she spoke to Delta Sigma Theta, and then Friday she went to Florida. So CNN.com reported on Friday, July 21st, 2023, Harris accuses, quote unquote, so-called leaders of pushing propaganda and waging culture wars in fiery speech. Okay, and waging culture wars in fiery speech. All right, now we discussed this on Roland Martin Unfiltered, and Roland shared some of the. We're going to clip 1, Doug, and Roland shared some of Vice President Kamala Harris' comments as well. Let's go to clip number 3. Let's go to clip 3 from Roland Martin Unfiltered, please.
Florida giving a speech today, and she addressed the ongoing issues there where Florida has just made some changes to their education rules as to how they're going to be describing formerly enslaved people, and literally putting it in the books there that they received a skill set for personal benefit. It's angered a lot of different people how Florida is trying to now redefine the issue of slavery in this country. The Vice President wasted no time addressing that issue in her remarks today in Jacksonville.
There is extraordinary leadership, Jennifer and everyone else, in this state, and you are not alone. You are not alone. You are not alone. I'll tell you, yesterday I was traveling to meet with some folks when I heard the news about what happened here, and our team and the president, is completely on board with this. We said, we got to remind the folks of Florida that you're not fighting out here by yourselves. We believe in you. We believe in the people of Florida. And so I decided to come and visit with you today. And, well, let me start by saying this. I am a product of a public school education. I was sharing with some of the teachers earlier. My first grade teacher, Mrs. Frances Wilson, God rest her soul, attended my law school graduation. I am a product of teachers and an educational system that believed in providing the children with the full expanse of information that allowed them to then, and encouraged them to then reach their own conclusions and exercise critical thought in a way that was directly intended to nurture their leadership. I am fully aware that it is because of that approach that I stand before you as Vice President of the United States of America. So when I think about where we are today and who we are as a community of people, within the beauty of the diversity that I see in front of me, I know that there are many things we share in common. And first and foremost, we share in common a deep love of our country and the responsibility we each have then to fight for its ideals. That is so critically important on the subject then that gathers us here today. Because you see, when we think about it, part of true patriotism means fighting for a nation that will be better for each generation to come.
Okay, you have to get past that ad.
Right? Believing that our nation is worth the investment in fighting for the children of America, that we will provide them with the information they need to go into the world and lead. I will tell you, as Vice President of the United States, I have now met with over 100 world leaders, presidents, prime ministers, chancellors, and kings. One of the things about who we are as Americans is we can walk in those rooms with the authority earned, for the most part, except recently from TheAHNShow, earned authority to walk in those rooms talking about what it means to uphold democracies, the importance of rule of law, human rights. And when we walk in those rooms, we do it proud of the fact that we have been held up and held out as a role model. Well, the thing about being a role model is this. When you're a role model, people watch what you do to see if it matches what you say. So understand the impact that this is having not only for the children of Florida and our nation, but potentially people around the world. Because on a more specific point in that regard, we want to know that we are sending our children out as role models of a democracy who therefore know the importance of speaking and telling truth, the importance of understanding when you are a leader, you must know history. And by the way, be really clear. Be really clear. All the folks that we would go out and send our children to go and meet around the world are clear about our history. And we're going to send our own children out to not know what it is? Building in a handicap for our children that they are going to be the ones in the room who don't know their own history when the rest of the world does? Think about this for a moment.
Joining us, Matt Manning, civil rights attorney, also Michael Imhotep, host African History Network show out of Detroit. Glad to have both of y'all here. Matt, what really jumps out here, I think, when you look at what's going on, look, I wrote my book, White Fear, How the Browning of America is Making White Folks Lose Their Minds, the attack on critical race theory, the attack on DEI, the attack on affirmative action. And so what you have here are folks who are trying to redefine the history of this country. They've been so pissed off the 1619 Project. They're angered that African Americans and Latinos are now having their own voice, and we're seeing this thing play out in Florida, in Texas, in other places as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Gary Bledsoe, the president of the NAACP in Austin there, said, or rather in Texas, said, look, this is to show that this is no longer the lofty goal of just educating students. And that's what's so problematic about this. You know, colleges are usually the place where people go to have an exchange of ideas. So in that space especially, you would expect that there would be an adherence to true historical standards and the truth about history. But beyond that, a tolerance for something you don't agree with. But what we see now is an attack in our legislature, Congress, everywhere. They're attacking this idea of wokeism. And what's so problematic about that is that it's not intellectually honest. Most people have no idea what critical race theory is.
Okay, pause it right there. We'll pick this up on the other side of the break, and you'll get to hear what I said when Roland came to me. You listen to the African History Network show, 9:10 a.m. Superstation, WFDF. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Back from break in 4 minutes. Stand by. Stand by, everybody. Back from break in 4 minutes. All right. You can support the African History Network, $ the AHN show through Cash App and through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show. And we have the information at our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. Okay, stand by. Back from break in 3 minutes. How's everybody doing? Give us a thumbs up, give us a heart, give us a like on this broadcast. Follow us on our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP, and our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. Stand by. Who still needs to register for the online history classes I teach on Saturdays and Sundays? Next class is Saturday, July 29th, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Back from break in 2 minutes.
Once 9:10 a.m. is what you need. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. On the African History Network show, we focus on educating and empowering and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world. A lot of people don't know what the hell they're talking about. They may have the ears of expertise, but some people need to learn how to stay in their own lane. If you don't know, just say you don't know. So we have a lot to talk about, so we're going to jump right into this. Catch it all right here on 9:10 a.m. Superstation.
Welcome back to the African History Network show. All right. I want to go back to this clip from Roland Martin Unfiltered. We're going to pick this up at the 8-minute mark. We were discussing Vice President Kamala Harris' speech in Florida denouncing the new social studies standards coming out of Florida. Let's go back to this clip, please, Doug.
Juneteenth or whatever else thing that's politically expedient, they're going to shuck and jive for that when the time comes. But the rest of the year, they're doing everything they can to expressly deny us history. And that is an attack on democracy, an attack on personhood, and something that we see from our legislature, and especially in cities, because their job is to make sure we have the services we need, not to deny us the truth of history. So I'm sad to see this, but this is part and parcel with what we're seeing around the country.
Are you a low-income American on Medicaid?
All right, we had to get past that ad.
Michael, what you're dealing with here, Michael, again, we're seeing the drama that's taking place, and we're seeing again how they don't want this next generation to truly understand what this country has gone through. And frankly, what this is all about is, again, as Paul Harvey used to say, now the rest of the story. And so they sort of had this other story that has been cute, but wasn't truly factual. And it's driving them crazy. There's another side to this.
Yeah, well, you know, there's so much going on with this. I was reading articles dealing with this yesterday. I'll be discussing this on the African History Network show this weekend. First of all, to try to do this revisionist history, and I haven't read the 216-page document that came from the Florida State Board of Education, but from what I understand, it includes controversial language like slaves develop skills, which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit. So when we look at this history, there were at least 262 skills, trades, and crafts that African people had in this country from 1619 to 1865. In the book by James Newton, The Other Slaves, Mechanics, Artisans, and Craftsmen, 1978, documents this, okay? But to try to reframe this history, and it appears like they're trying to make it like it was the norm for slaves who had skills to be able to make money while they're enslaved and benefit themselves, things like this. Yes, you would have some instances of this, but this was not the norm, okay? This is not what happened to the majority of them. And, you know, when we talk about this revisionist history, now this does not surprise me at all, because there was a 130-year campaign or so propaganda revisionist history surrounding the Civil War called the Lost Cause. And the Lost Cause rewrote the history of the Civil War. It made the South the heroes, the Confederates the heroes. It made them the victims of the Union. Okay, it said that the Civil War wasn't because of slavery, it's because of secession. It said that the Confederate soldiers were heroes and all different types of things like this. And one of the biggest pieces, maybe in the last 40 years, of that revisionist history would be the TV show The Dukes of Hazzard, either intentionally or unintentionally, because the car that was really the star of the Dukes of Hazzard is called the General Lee, named after General Robert E. Lee, who was a traitor to the Union, the Confederate general from Virginia. And on top of the General Lee car is the Confederate battle flag of Northern Virginia, which is the symbol of the insurrection, okay, which was General Robert E. Lee's regiment, okay? So we have to have a better understanding of history to see these threats coming. And lastly, this is the power that a governor has. And Ron DeSantis, even though he may act stupid, he has a degree in history from Yale University. He acts stupid, but he's not ignorant of history. Okay, this is the example, another example why elections have consequences. We have to stop threats like this.
Okay, stop it right there. All right, so that was from Friday, July 21st, Roland Martin Unfiltered. And we have extras of that on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, and our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, and you can watch that on Roland's YouTube channel also, Roland Martin on YouTube. Okay, now, in that clip, I mentioned the lost cause, Now, when you take my Sunday class, Black resistance movements from the Haitian Revolution, U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, and Black Power Movement, 1800 to 1968. We deal with this period of time, Civil War, Reconstruction. We deal with the lost cause. Now this article here, this is from Encyclopedia Virginia, encyclopediavirginia.org. This talks about the lost cause. Okay. Now, the lost cause, and I'm going to try to zoom in on this here. The lost cause is an interpretation of the American U.S. Civil War, which was 1861 to 1865, that seeks to present from the perspective of Confederates and in the best possible terms. The lost cause was developed by white Southerners, many of them former Confederate generals, in a post-war climate of economic, racial, and social uncertainty. The lost cause created and romanticized the Old South and the Confederate war effort, often distorting history in the process. So the lost cause goes back to about the 1890s. Okay. Now, for this reason, many historians have labeled the lost cause a myth or a legend. It is an important example of public memory, one in which nostalgia for the Confederate past is accompanied by a collective forgetting of the horrors of slavery. Okay, this lost cause myth is an example, an important example of public memory, one in which nostalgia for the Confederate past is accompanied by a collective forgetting of the horrors of slavery. Okay, and I mentioned the Dukes of Hazzard TV show. Just a good old boy, never meaning no harm, beats all you ever saw get in trouble with the law since the day they were born. Okay, now the Dukes of Hazzard is part of this lost cause propaganda campaign, either intentionally or unintentionally. And you saw Uncle Jesse with the Confederate battle flag of Northern Virginia. Okay. And you saw Bowen Luke Duke jumping in and out of the General Lee Charger, the General Lee car. Okay. Now, I'm not saying in the show there was anything that they said or did that would be considered bigoted or anything like this, but either intentionally or unintentionally, what the TV show The Dukes of Hazzard did. And then you got Daisy Duke. Okay. Catherine Bach portrayed Daisy Duke. You had cut off shorts that were popular in that African-American community named after Daisy Duke. You had a popular song from the 1990s, Look at Them Girls with the Daisy Duke song, where the Daisy Duke cut off shorts is named after Daisy Duke from the TV show The Dukes of Hazzard. So the Dukes of Hazzard helped to influence pop culture. Okay, now when we look at the Confederate flags of the Confederate States of America, the Confederacy, there were 3 flags that flew over the Confederate States of America from 1861 to 1865. That flag that's on the General Lee car was never one of those flags. Okay, that's the Confederate battle flag of Northern Virginia under General Robert E. Lee's army. That's not even the Confederate flag. All right, read this article here because we're running out of time. Read this article from CNN.com. I teach all this in my online classes. We get deep into this history. Confederate battle flags separating the myths from facts. Confederate battle flags separating the myths from facts. This is from June 24th, 2015 by Ben Brumfield, okay, for CNN.com. So a lot of this that we are taught and handed down and things like this is a bunch of myths, okay? It's not real history. Okay, now if we go back to the lost cause from encyclopediavirginia.com. All right, now providing a sense of relief to white Southerners who feared being dishonored by defeat. The lost cause was largely accepted in the years following the Civil War by white Americans who found it to be a useful tool, in reconciling North and South. The Lost Cause has lost much of its academic support, but continues to be an important part of how the Civil War is commemorated in the South and remembered in American pop culture. Now, the 6 tenets of the Lost Cause were: number one, secession, not slavery, caused the Civil War. The South seceding from the Union, starting with South Carolina, December 20th, 1860, about 6 weeks after Abraham Lincoln became president-elect. South Carolina was the first state to secede from the Union. Number two, African Americans were faithful slaves. African Americans were faithful slaves, loyal to their masters and the Confederate cause, and unprepared for the responsibilities of freedom. They said, basically, they said we were too stupid to be free. Okay, we had to be. This is what the South said. We were too stupid to be free. We had to be taken care of by kindly, benevolent masters. We'll deal with this on the other side of the break. This to the African History Network show. I'm Michael Imhotep. Back from break in 4 minutes. Stand by. Back from break in 4 minutes. Okay, share this broadcast on your social media platforms. You don't get this type of history, this type of information most other places. Who still needs to register for the online history classes I teach on Saturdays and Sundays? Visit our website, TheAHNShow.com, TheAHNShow.com. Scroll down and you'll see the information for our radio show, Sunday night radio show. The class that I did on, so I did a free question and answer session on Saturday. You can still register for that. That was 12 noon. Click right here to register for that free question and answer session I did. If you missed our class on Saturday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, class number 4, as soon as you register for this 12-week online course, you can watch it. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. Go back and watch it anytime. Click right here, register here for full 12-week online course. Class is on sale, $80, regularly $130. Okay. Back from break in 3 minutes. Back from break in 2 minutes. Stand by. Okay, we got to go to clip number 4. Let's see, we run out of time on this here. Okay, we got to finish up the 6 tenets of the Lost Cause. Then we have to go to the article from Tampa Bay Times. Okay. All right, Doug, we're going to go to clip 4. Clip number 4 is next. Okay, back from break in 1 minute. Back from break in 1 minute. And then also we need to look at this article from the Washington Post. Governor Ron DeSantis responds. Where is that? Okay, DeSantis doubles down. Back from break in 1 minute. Stand by.
The Superstation, Detroit's only African-American talk radio.
Great programming. When it's what you want, 9:10 a.m. is what you need. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. On the African History Network show, we focus on educating the blind and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world. A lot of people don't know what the hell they're talking about. Then you have the areas of expertise. But some people need to learn how to stay in their own lane. If you don't know, just say you don't know. So we have a lot to talk about, so we're going to jump right into this. Catch it all right here on 9:10 a.m. Superstation. The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producers and or the persons appearing on the program, and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of 910 AM Superstation or Adele Media.
Welcome back to the African History Network show. All right. If you like this type of information, visit our website, TheAHNShow.com, TheAHNShow.com. You can register for the online history classes that I teach on Saturdays and Sundays. When you scroll down the page, you'll see our social media handles, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. You'll see the information for our Sunday night radio show on Saturday, July 22nd. 2023 at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. I did a free question and answer session dealing with the online class that I teach, our Saturday online class. You can still watch that free question and answer session. Just click right here on the website for register here. We had a great class session Saturday, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time of my 12-week online course, Ancient Kemet, which is one of the original names for Egypt. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Our next class will be Saturday, July 29th. As soon as you register for this course, you can go back and watch the entire, you can watch everything. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go watch it anytime. Even after the 12-week online course is over with, you'll still have access, full access to the class. So you can watch everything a year from now, 2 years from now. The class is on sale, $80. My Sunday class, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Black resistance movements from the Haitian Revolution, U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, and Black Power Movement, 1800 to 1968. Next class will be this coming Sunday, July 30th. Okay. And then we have a bundle pack of my lectures in digital download format. That's still going on right now. The African History Awakens the African Mind from Mental Death. It's on sale. We have a weekend promotion. It's $50. You get 15 of my lectures. Really, it's going to be 16 because the last lecture that you get is the one I did in November 2022 dealing with the new Black Panther movie. Okay. Black Panther Wakanda Forever. So that's at our website, TheAfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All right. Let's go back. I want to finish this up quickly here, dealing with the lost cause. So we were talking about the lost cause right before the break. The lost cause is this about a 130-year propaganda campaign to rewrite the history of the Civil War and to make the South, the Confederacy, look like the heroes. And the 6 tenets of the lost cause are: number one, succession, not slavery, caused the Civil War. Number two, African Americans were faithful slaves. We were happy, faithful slaves. We loved our master more than our master loved himself. African Americans were faithful slaves, loyal to their masters, and the Confederate cause. We were loyal to the Confederate cause, and we were unprepared for the responsibilities of freedom because they said we were so stupid and childlike that we wouldn't be able to take care of ourselves. Okay. And even after slavery ended, there was an effort by the South to advocate for bringing back the peculiar institution. They said that Black men will rape white women and you have chaos, and slavery kept all this intact. The movie The Birth of a Nation was debuted February 8th, 1915. 1915 was the 50th year anniversary of the Civil War ending and of the Civil War ending and the 13th Amendment, all of this. 1915. One of the themes of the movie, The Birth of a Nation. Now, The Birth of a Nation was directed by D.W. Griffith. It was about a 3-hour silent movie, longest movie at the time, most expensive movie, cost about $100,000 to make it. The movie, The Birth of a Nation, was based upon a novel called The Klansman, by a man named the Reverend Thomas Dixon. Reverend Thomas Dixon. Okay. And the movie The Birth of a Nation takes place during slavery, Reconstruction era, and slavery, Civil War, 1861, 1865, and the Reconstruction era, 1865, 1877. It takes place in South Carolina, Piedmont, South Carolina. And they have the slave owner he's a doctor, and he's a very kind, gentle slave owner. And all the negative stereotypes of African Americans are depicted in that movie. And they show the slaves as being happy slaves, dancing and singing and performing for the slave master. This is all in the movie. Then the Civil War comes through and it destroys the South's way of life. It destroys this peculiar institution which kept everything in balance. And then there's a scene where it shows a black man trying to rape a white virgin, a white female virgin. Now, almost all of the roles of African Americans in the movie The Birth of a Nation were white people in blackface. Okay. Then there's they show Union Negro soldiers, former Union Negro soldiers, in this rebellion, and the Ku Klux Klan comes to put down this rebellion of these former Union Negro soldiers. And at the end of the movie, they say this is the birth of a nation. So the Ku Klux Klan, which was 1915, was the 50th anniversary of the founding of the Ku Klux Klan, which was founded December 24th, 1865 in Pulaski, Tennessee, a few days after the 13th Amendment was adopted, December 18th, 1865. The Ku Klux Klan are the heroes of the movie The Birth of a Nation. And this movie helped to rejuvenate the Ku Klux Klan, which had largely died out by 1915, so much so in newspaper ads where they had ads for the movie The Birth of a Nation. Oftentimes the Ku Klux Klan would take out recruiting ads in the newspaper next to the ads for the movie The Birth of a Nation. So when we look at this lost cause effort, number three, the third tenet of the 6 tenets of the lost cause is the Confederacy was defeated militarily only because of the Union's overwhelming advantages in men and resources. Okay, only because of the Union's overwhelming advantages in men and resources. Number 4, Confederate soldiers were heroic and saintly. Number 5, the most heroic and saintly of all Confederates, perhaps of all Americans, was General Robert E. Lee, who the car on the Dukes of Hazzard is named after. He was a brutal slave owner, a white supremacist slave owner who committed treason against the U.S. based upon Article 3, Section 3 of the U.S. Constitution. Okay? And he took up arms to keep African people enslaved. The lost cause makes him the hero. The most heroic and saintly of all Confederates, perhaps of all Americans, is General Robert E. Lee. And number 6, the number 6 tenet of the lost cause revisionist history of the Civil War is Southern women were loyal to the Confederate cause and sanctified by the sacrifice of their loved ones. Now, the historical consensus, however, presents a picture that is far more complicated, one in which some tenets of the cause are obviously false and some are at least partly true. Lost cause proponents have stressed the primacy of states' rights, and we saw states' rights during the civil rights movement as well, in opposition to Brown versus Board of Education, opposition to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Voting Rights Act of 1965. And the constitutionality, okay, the primacy of states' rights and the constitutionality of secession, and have cited the secession crisis along with political squabbles such as tariff disputes and broad claims about the evolution of different societies in the North and South, and the cause of the war instead of slavery. Okay. At the same time, Northern abolitionists have been portrayed as provocateurs and slavery as justified and an institution that eventually would have died on its own accord. Okay. Read the rest of this here. This is from Encyclopedia Virginia. This deals with the history of the lost cause. All right. Now, there was a piece from, let's see, there's a piece from, there's an article from Washington Post. Okay, this deals with Governor Ron DeSantis doubles down on claim that some blacks benefited from slavery. Okay, this is from July 2nd, 2023. DeSantis doubles down on claim that some blacks benefited from slavery. GOP presidential candidate draws renewed criticism after suggesting slavery helped African Americans develop skills such as being a blacksmith. Okay, so read this as well, and they quote Will Hurd in here. So DeSantis is drawing, getting backlash from some presidential candidates as well. Okay, so take a look at that. When we come back from the break, I know we're coming up on a break, I want to look at this piece from the Tampa Bay Times, which dispels some of the myths being put out by the Florida Department of Education's new standards, because almost half of the 16 African Americans that were given as examples of black people who used their skills to benefit from slavery, almost half of them were never slaves in the first place. You listen to the African History Network show. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Stand by. Back from break in 4 minutes. Stand by. Back from break in 4 minutes. How's everybody doing? Give us a thumbs up, give us a heart, give us a like on this broadcast. Okay, where are we? We got okay, we're going to get to that story next week. That other one. We have to do update on, we got to do an update on Carley Russell. Back from break in 2 minutes. Stand by. Back from break in 1 minute.
host, Brother Michael Imhotep. On the African History Network Show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora around the world. A lot of people don't know what the hell they're talking about. Then you have an area of expertise. But some people need to learn how to stay in their own lane. If you don't know, just say you don't know. So we have a lot to talk about, so we're going to jump right into this. Catch it all right here on 910 AM Superstation.
Welcome back to the African History Network show. Okay, if we go to Tampa Bay Times has this article, but they have a paywall up. So Yahoo.com, YahooNews.com picked up this article as well. Benefited from slavery. Critics say some of the state's examples were never slaves. We're going to go to clip, that last clip 4 here in just a second, Doug. I want to squeeze that in from WHAS, I think Channel 11 out of Florida. Benefited from slavery. Critics say some of the state's examples were never even slaves. Okay, so in this piece here, it talks about the 16 examples that Dr. Francis Presley Rice, co-founder of the Yoakum African American History Association and chairperson of the National Black Republican Association, provided the information to the department. Okay, and they provided these 16 examples. Responding to mounting criticism, the department issued a statement Thursday offering 16 examples of historic figures it said fit that description of African Americans who were slaves but learned skills during slavery that benefited themselves. Okay, and Alex Lafranconi, a spokesperson for the Florida Department of Education, said the experts stand behind their examples. Okay, now the fact that Dr. Francis Presley Rice is a chairperson of the National Black Republican Association, right there, that tells you something's wrong. All right. But other sources offer conflicting descriptions of the 16 historic figures, and critics came forward to attack the department's claims. Among the problems, historic sources show several of the 16 individuals were never even slaves. Historic sources show several of the 16 individuals that these two black PhDs put up as examples to justify this nonsense. Half of these people weren't even slaves. Okay, so when we look here quickly, we look at let me see, they give the examples here, like Lewis Latimer. They talk about Booker T. Washington, for instance. We know Booker T. Washington was a slave. He was free when he was 9 years old. He worked in mines and as a houseboy before entering school, according to Tuskegee University, which he founded in 1881. Okay, Georgetown University, Lewis Latimer. They talk about Lewis Latimer and James Forten. Georgetown University postdoctoral fellow Joshua Stein took issue with the state's use of James Forten and Lewis Latimer as examples. The department said Lewis Latimer was a blacksmith born into slavery in 1848 and freed in 1852, and James Forten was a shoemaker born into slavery in 1766, who escaped in 1784. A museum dedicated to Lewis Latimer states he was born to two self-liberated, formerly enslaved parents. Lewis Latimer was never a slave. He was self-educated. He worked as an inventor, participating in the development of the telephone and incandescent lighting, among other inventions. The Museum of the American Revolution describes James Forten as a black entrepreneur born to free parents. James Forten was never a slave. He served on privateer ships during the American Revolutionary War and became a wealthy sailmaker. You look at Henry Blair. They give the example of Henry Blair. Now, I went and read the information at biography.com on Henry Blair also. The Florida Department of Education listed Henry Blair as a slave who became a blacksmith and an inventor. Now, biography.com, and everybody can go check it out, biography.com on Henry Blair, and several other sites state that there is no information indicating that Henry Blair was ever a slave. He invented a corn planter and a contemplantor of becoming the second African-American person to earn a U.S. patent. Then this information coming from the Florida Department of Education, coming from these two black PhDs, they said Paul Cuffey, okay, was who took African-Americans back to Sierra Leone, okay. They said Paul Cuffey was born a slave. That's false also. The department referred to Paul Cuffey as a shoemaker and ship owner born into slavery and escaped in 1781. According to paulcuffey.org, operated by the Westport Historical Society, Paul Cuffey was born in 1759 to an emancipated slave. Now, his father's name was Kofi. His father, Kofi, was from the Ashanti Empire, and his father was a blacksmith, okay? And his father is going to be able to gain his freedom. All right. But Paul Cuffey was born free. Now, having worked on whaling boats starting at age 14, Paul Cuffey established a shipping business in Massachusetts. So read it, because it goes through and it breaks down and it shows how almost half of the people that these two black PhDs put out, saying that these were slaves that gained skills during slavery that benefited them later in life, half these people weren't even slaves. So you have to ask, well, wait a second. If the half of the information that you put out to justify the 216-page document, if half of that information is false, then how much in the 216-page document is false? Okay, read the rest of this here. Let's squeeze in this last clip, clip number 4. This is from WHAS, Governor Ron DeSantis response. Let's go to this clip, please, Doug.
Against Governor Ron DeSantis and the Florida Board of Education over the state's new standards for teaching history of U.S. slavery.
These are the most robust standards in African American history, probably anywhere in the country.
The new guidelines require middle school students be taught, quote, how slaves developed skills, which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit. An idea Vice President Kamala Harris in Florida Friday lambasted.
How is it that anyone could suggest that in the midst of these atrocities, that there was any benefit to being subjected to this level of dehumanization?
In high school, the guidelines require the teaching of both acts of violence perpetrated against and by African Americans, which Florida's Education Association says diminishes an event like the 1920 Ocoee Massacre, where at least 30 African Americans were killed for attempting to vote. A volunteer member of the task force tells ABC News he stands by their work amid criticism the standards gloss over the horrors of slavery.
It is the case that Africans proved resourceful, resilient, and adaptive, and were able to develop skills and aptitudes which served to their benefit, both while enslaved and after enslavement.
And I wasn't involved in it.
On the campaign trail, DeSantis distancing himself from the specifics of the curriculum, but still the new guidelines.
I think that they're probably going to show some of the folks that eventually parlayed, being a blacksmith into doing things later in life.
And tonight, Republican rivals for the 2024 presidential nomination piling on. Former Texas Congressman Will Hurd writing, slavery wasn't a jobs program that taught beneficial skills. It was literally dehumanizing and subjugated people as property because they lacked any rights or freedom.
Okay, pause it right there. All right, those watching on Facebook and YouTube, we're out of time right here. Those watching on Facebook and YouTube, keep watching. We'll keep going for a few more minutes. Right now, it's Correct Wrong Behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you next week. Peace. All right, stand by. Okay, we're going to keep going. You can support the African History Network, $, the AHN Show through Cash App and through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show, or visit our website, TheAfricanHistoryNetwork.com, TheAfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Because we have the, when you scroll down the page past the information for the classes, we have the information there. You can click on those links. Okay, let's continue. Now, there was a article here we'll talk about next week. This deals with how ex-Confederates spread racist attitudes far and wide after the Civil War. How ex-Confederates spread racist attitudes far and wide after the Civil War. And this is from June 21st, 2023, from NBCnews.com. We posted this article on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network. So some of you all may have seen this article here. So this deals with after the Civil War ends and a migration of white Southerners from the South out west. Okay, a new study outlines how white people's migration during and after the Civil War from the Confederate South to the West bolstered white supremacy and institutional racism in non-slave states, helping create the vast racial disparities that exist today nationwide. 5 researchers from separate colleges collaborated on the study called Confederate Diaspora, Confederate Diaspora to compile and study census data that tracked the migration to the out west of white Americans, including 60,000 former plantation owners. The former Southerners took on local positions of authority. The former Southerners took on local positions of authority like police officers, clergy, and politicians, giving them influence to create a post-Civil War culture that continued to oppress Black people even after slavery ended. The results in structural and systemic racism in almost every walk of life today. This results in structural and systemic racism in almost every walk of life today: education, housing, jobs, healthcare, and wealth, among other areas, that continues to hamper progress for African Americans, according to a working paper by the National Bureau of Economic Research that came out in the month of June. Okay, read the rest of this article here. Now, this shows the lasting impact of a legacy of slavery, the Civil War, the Reconstruction era, how ex-Confederates spread racist attitudes far and wide after the Civil War. So when I hear these MAGA Republicans, where I hear these Black conservatives who say slavery was a long time ago, that doesn't have anything to do with today, Civil War was a long time ago, that's an absolute lie. And they know better than that. That's an absolute lie. They know better than that. And there's overwhelming evidence to prove that they are lying also. Okay, now, we got an update in the Carley Russell case out of Alabama, and there was a press conference that was held by the police earlier this week, and we're going to try to squeeze in this clip here from there's a clip from Good Morning America that I wanted to play. So more and more as time went on, so we know last week Saturday she returned home mysteriously, and more questions circulated. We know that her parents did at least one interview after she returned home. I don't think they're doing any more interviews, her parents. And more questions kept popping up. All right. I want to go to this clip here from Good Morning America. Let's go to this, cue this up here. This is from, this would have been from Friday. This was this, I think, Friday, July 21st or Thursday, one of them. Let me see. It was the day after the press conference. Let's see. Let's go to this clip here. clips from the laptop. For some reason, it's not coming through. I think I have to get a new audio mixer. I'm not sure why that's not coming through, because I can hear it on my end. Something else I have to figure out. Okay, but if we look at this article here, let's see. If we look at this article from CBS News, police say they can't verify Carley Russell's abduction. So Carley Nicole Russell, a 25-year-old nursing student who went missing for 2 days, told police she'd been abducted, but police have not found any evidence of a crime, officials in Alabama said Wednesday. Okay. Now, investigators have not been able to verify most of Russell's statement about being captured. Hoover Police Chief Nick Dursis said, police said that prior to her disappearance, Russell made several strange online searches, including whether you have to pay for Amber Alerts, how to take money from a cash register without being caught, and searches for the movie Taken, which is about, starring Liam Neeson, which is about a woman who is abducted and then ensuing quest to save her from her kidnappers. Now, there were also searches related to the Birmingham bus station and bus tickets from Birmingham to Nashville. Now, Carley Russell vanished Thursday night after calling 911 to report spotting a toddler on an interstate in Alabama. Russell returned home 2 days later. It was Saturday night when she returned home, and the incident gained national attention. She gave a brief statement to police when she returned home, but officers did not press for details out of respect for Russell and her family, at least then, because she was taken to the hospital when she returned home. We've asked to interview Carley a second time, but have not been granted that request. Police Chief Dursis said at the time of the interview, at the time of the press conference on Wednesday, there are many questions left to be answered, but only Carley can respond, but only Carley can provide those answers. Investigators have not found any evidence of a child on the highway, the Hoover Police Department said Wednesday. The department never received any other 911 calls about a toddler on Interstate 459, even though multiple vehicles passed through the area on Thursday night. While she was on the phone with a dispatcher about the toddler, Carley Russell traveled in her car about 600 yards, the distance of about 6 football fields, Police Chief Dursis said. She told the dispatcher there was a child wearing a white shirt and a diaper on the highway. Russell said that as best as she could tell, he was not wearing shoes. Okay, so read the rest of this article. And Police Chief Dursis says 6 football fields. To think that a toddler barefoot that could be 3 or 4 years old could travel 6 football fields without getting in the roadway, without crying, it's very hard for me to understand, he said. So read the rest of this article from CBS News. Police say they can't verify Carley Russell's abduction claim. This is from July 19th. This article was updated Wednesday, July 19th, 2023. Okay. So we're running out of time here, and the article next week will discuss this topic dealing with the Congressional Black Caucus PAC that has been created. It's a very, very important topic. So we'll discuss this on the next Sunday show because we're out of time here today. This deals with, so there was an article from TheAHNShow on this, as well as NBC News. We posted the article from NBC News on our fan page, the African History Network, a few days ago. But this article here from TheAHNShow from July 18th, 2023. This is a new Rolling Sea Action Fund PAC. Let me pull this up here. New Rolling Sea Action Fund PAC set to mobilize Black voters ahead of 2024. Okay, this is from thehill.com, July 18th, 2023. New Rolling Sea Action Fund PAC set to mobilize Black voters ahead of 2024. The Congressional Black Caucus is launching a super PAC to mobilize Black voters ahead of 2024 in an effort to give the House of Representatives a Democratic majority in the process, elect the nation's first Black Speaker of the House. The Rolling Sea Action Fund will raise money as well as invest in different advertising and campaigns in the upcoming election cycle. The Democrats currently hold 212 seats in the House of Representatives, meaning that they would need to flip a minimum of 5 seats to become the majority party in 2024. You need 218 seats to be the majority. The CBC's former political director, Nakara Campbell Wallace, is the executive director of the new fund. Campbell Wallace told thehill.com that one of the main goals of the fund will be to recognize that Black voters are the quote unquote backbone of the Democratic Party. She said when Black voters turn out, they turn out and they fight for democracy. This organization shares the mission and goals of the CBC PAC, Congressional Black Caucus Political Action Committee, which is focused on recruitment. This will be an avenue to really target folks in battlefield districts that are crucial for us to take back the House in 2024, end quote, because you can't get meaningful bills passed in the House of Representatives with the coup plotters and domestic terrorist sympathizers and the crazies, the QAnon crazies like Marjorie Taylor Greene in charge of the House of Representatives. Okay. Now, the Rolling Sea Action Fund will target districts that have around 8% or more Black voting age population. The goal is to invest. The goal is to invest 8 figures into mobilization and campaigns, Campbell Wallace said. So it's estimated that at least $10 million will be invested in this campaign. But the fund will also focus on year-round political investment in Black communities, something many activists have said does not happen. This is something I've said it has to happen. You have to have year-round funding and investment in the African-American community. Though Black voters consistently cast their ballots for Democrats in higher numbers than any other racial group, Democrats have faced criticism from activists who accuse politicians of avoiding Black voting areas until little more than a week before Election Day. Now, as I've said before, we should be focused on taking over the Democratic Party. We should be focused on taking over the Democratic Party, like similar to how the MAGA Republicans have hijacked the Republican Party. Okay, but if African Americans take over the Democratic Party, or at least become a powerful third force in the Democratic Party, like the way the Tea Party became a force in the Republican Party, okay, this will be beneficial for everybody. But many of us are not thinking from a position of power. Okay, and politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. So I've said before, we have to stop telling African Americans to exercise your right to vote. You don't vote for exercise. Okay, if you want to exercise, you go to the gym and work out. You vote for power. When we change what the end result is not for exercise, it's for power acquisition. When we change what the end result is, then it will rewire the way our brains have been designed to work. And we will focus on acquiring power as opposed to exercising, as opposed to voting for symbolism. And you have to put the right people in political positions in power to write the legislation and pass the laws that are beneficial to African Americans. And what's good for African Americans is good for America in general. And actually, Nakara Campbell Wallace, I think she said something like something to that effect, talking about how these policies that are good for African Americans are good for America in general as well. In one of these statements that I read from her, she talked about this also. It may have been the article from NBC News. Let's see. The Campbell Wallace told The Hill that the new super PAC will be, quote, intentional and authentic, end quote, with their messaging to Black voters. Okay, 58 members in the Congressional Black Caucus right now. Congress also saw Hakeem Jeffries make history last year as the first Black lawmaker to lead a congressional party. Representation does matter. You have to see yourself in order to be what you see. Nakara Campbell Wallace said, having all these voices at the table with different thoughts, different types of Black people, because we know that Black people are not a monolith, really lends itself to that. Okay. And okay, so read the rest of this article here from thehill.com. We'll talk about this some more next week. New rolling C Action Fund PAC set to mobilize Black voters ahead of 2024. All right, you can support the African History Network because we definitely need your support. Register for the online history classes that I teach on Saturdays and Sundays. Also on our website, we have our PayPal Cash App information, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show. And when you go to our website, it has the graphic there, which shows the, it shows, let me see, which one is it here, right here. It shows our official Cash App tag, and we have the link there as well. $ the AHN Show. Because there's some fake African History Network Cash App accounts out there that I'm still trying to get shut down because they've been stealing money from us. So that's why I had to create this graphic. So we scroll down. Let's see. It's where did I put it? I put it after the classes. Okay, right here. Okay, so we have our Cash App tag. Click right there. It takes you to the QR code. All right, and our official Cash App tag is $ the AHN Show, SHOW. When you go to it, it will say Michael. These other ones here are fake African History Network Cash App accounts. All right, and they're using variations of our tag. Okay, so there's about 5 fake accounts that I've identified that I'm trying to get shut down. All right, we have to get out of here. Remember, right now it's correct wrong behaviors, not over till we win. Wakanda forever, and we'll talk to you next week. Peace.